Hello, and welcome to Workshop 3 for the Laguna Niguel Needs Assessment. I'm excited about this workshop tonight because we're going to look at a lot of the information we've collected, and we're going to move forward into synthesizing some of the final comments of this process as we move along to the Laguna Niguel Needs Assessment process. And what that is it's a project to understand and identify recreation needs and wants throughout the community. This document will be a guide, an implementation tool for future parks and recreation facilities and programs. The most important part of it is that it's developed by you, the community. We put the document together, the recommendations together based on community needs, community ideas. So the more you share ideas with us, the more information you share, pass it on to your friends and family members throughout the community, the stronger this document is at the end of it. The process we're going through will be conducted in 4 stages. An inventory of existing recreation resources, an extensive community outreach and engagement process, which we've gone through, and we're going to sadly conclude with our Workshop 3 and our workshop series tonight. And then we move into the needs analysis stage, where we look for those common threads among all of the information we've collected to see where some of those maximum community impacts may be throughout this process. Then ultimately, the recommendations. And with that, we'll create a document that shows what we've heard from the community, where some of these possible opportunities may exist, and then what our ultimate recommendations will be for the next 5, 10, 15 years into the future. As I mentioned, we're sadly coming to the closure of our community outreach process. We're towards the end of the timeline itself, and at the conclusion of this workshop, we'll start the data analysis, the needs analysis section. So after the next few months, through the end of the year here, we'll actually be preparing the report and information. As we move along, we'll post as much as we can on the website and the website updates. So please continue to check back throughout the project website as we conclude this process. As I mentioned, one of the most important elements of this is the community engagement, that extensive outreach. We've gone through stakeholder interviews, sports organization questionnaires, statistically valid multimodal survey, and 3 workshops, tonight being the 3rd of those workshop series. We also have a project website. If you're watching this video, you might have missed the survey opportunity from the past ones, or if you're looking at this as a recording online, you can always go to the website throughout the rest of the year here, the remainder of the project, and click on the feedback button. That website has a feedback button where you can share any and all information you'd like to. It goes directly to the design scene. That way we can capture every voice throughout this project. There's also pop-up booths at any of the city events that the city has hosted. They're trying to make sure that there's every opportunity for community members to have their voices heard in this process. As I had mentioned, here we are in our community outreach process. We're all the way to the right of this chart, sadly. This is our 3rd and final workshop series. However, as I mentioned, that feedback button will still be there live on the website for the remainder of the project. Now, as we've gone through this process, we've collected a number of voices, and I just want to share with you some of those numbers that we've heard. We've had over 1,100 views on the project website, which is a tremendous number. A lot of people are checking in on the website, looking at the information, and we've seen a lot of those views being unique. So what that tells us is there's a lot of return trips to the website. Please do that, because you can keep checking back in, seeing the updates of the project along the way, and you can at any point in time comment through that feedback button. We've had 22 feedback submittals. We've also had stakeholder interviews, 15 of those, 9 pop-up events. We had 122 responses on our first workshop. We had 178 responses on our second workshop. And then our multimodal survey, we collected over 842 responses. So we've had a tremendous number of community members participate in this process. And I encourage you to continue to participate and share it with your neighbors and friends and repost it on social media so everybody gets an opportunity to have their voice heard. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go through just briefly some of the data we've collected and what we've heard to date thus far. And at the end of this presentation, Workshop 3 survey will go live on the website where you can look at some of the information we've heard, and then we're going to ask you follow-up questions such as, when should we implement some of these things? So tonight, you're actually going to see some of the summarization of that data. On Workshop 1, it was conducted from September 8th to September 24th. We have 122 surveys completed in total on that workshop. We also had a great distribution of surveys collected across the community. Some of those top items that we heard when we asked the question, what are the most important community characteristics that make Laguna Niguel a great place to live, work, and play? Was that it was safe, it's clean, there's plenty of parks, it's a beautiful area and open space, there's a sense of community. We asked the question on the other side of that coin is, what are issues or trends that might be negatively impacting those important community characteristics? And we heard elements such as unsafe, parks, playgrounds, crime, homelessness. It doesn't mean that it's unsafe now, but that there is the potential that if we don't keep up that high standard of safety and cleanliness in our parks, that it could be impacted by this. So definitely, people are conscious and aware of it, and they want to preserve those great community characteristics. In fact, we asked that question on that survey as well too, is how can Parks and Recreation Department play a role in addressing those issues and preserving great community characteristics? And what we heard is safety, continuing that, set that bar high with safety and maintenance being very high throughout the community. Having events, the cleanliness in the parks, engaging with children, and as well as the family and improving playgrounds. We've heard a lot of information from the community to really preserve those great community characteristics. The next outreach event we had was the multimodal survey. And conducting a multimodal survey, we also looked at the geographic distribution, and a great distribution all across the community. We didn't have any segment of the community, both geographically or demographically, that we saw as missing in this opportunities throughout these outreach events. And I want to share just again a few of some of those top items that we heard from that multimodal community survey, which was 75% of the respondents on that survey identified that they get their Parks and Recreation program information from the city website or through Google. This is important information. So now as we program city events or conduct outreach opportunities, we know where to maximize our impact throughout the community. As well as we also heard 80% of those respondents visit a park or open space at least monthly. This means there's a strong group of participants throughout the community who love to be outdoors in nature. Heavy Parks and Recreation use throughout the city of Laguna Niguel. 28% of the respondents identified the Laguna Niguel Regional Park as the area they visit most often. This is important information because we'll look at what those recreation amenities are there and how that can be replicated throughout the city. And lastly, 91% had said that they're satisfied with Parks and Recreation maintenance and open space of the recreation facilities. This is the highest number I've seen in all my years of doing Parks and Recreation master planning, and that number ties back within those common threads to earlier, what are those great community characteristics? And you see there lots of satisfaction with parks and open space and maintenance of it, and the desire to preserve that, keep that bar high as we move forward into the future. Workshop number 2 was conducted from October 9th to October 23rd. We had 178 responses through that workshop, and you can see another great distribution all across the community throughout the area. So we have a good representation of data to look at. We asked the question was, again, what was the name of park or open space or recreation facility that you or members of your household visited most often? And you can see here some of those top responses. Crown Valley Pool and Aquatics, the Laguna Niguel Recreation Regional Park, Crown Valley Community Center, Aliso and Wood Canyon Wilderness Park, Crown Valley Park. A lot of mentions about the Crown Valley Park. Now, these were intended to be separate. As people gave them to us, we recorded them. And what we do as we start to conclude this process is we'll aggregate some of those items together that were intended to be the same area. And you can see, we'll look at those areas, those most commonly used facilities to find out why. In fact, that was our second question of the evening, is why do you visit those parks the most often? And what we heard here is an overwhelming majority, the top 2 bars there, were self-led recreational programs, both passive and active. That first one there at the top was self-led programs, including sports or recreation activities like exercising, jogging, running, pickleball, tennis, or swimming. And then the second one was active recreation like walking, picnic, nature viewing, or dog walking. Both very strong participants out into the community. What we heard a third, very interesting, was some organized sports was another reason why people visited the parks most often, such as softball, baseball, basketball, volleyball, organized sports that were led by an instructor or coach. This starts to give us information in terms of programming, what programming might be appropriate, either individual passive activities or group activities, such as the sports activities. We also heard a number of mentions throughout that one, as well as playgrounds, bicycling, cycling, mountain biking, and organized recreational programs and classes. Throughout this process, we asked very common questions such as, what is one facility you're looking for? What is one program you're looking for? And during this workshop too, we asked, what were one park feature or recreation facility most like to see added or improved within the city of Laguna Niguel? Here's some of those top responses. Playground improvements, the dog area, off-leash dog area, dog amenities. Nothing. I'm happy with it. This is an important element too, is when people are happy or satisfied with it, we know that the bar is here, we're going to continue to keep it there. But we also listen for some of those other views that might be able to move that bar a little bit higher. But now we see there's a strong satisfaction. Again, that common thread throughout the process that we've heard is there is a lot of happiness with the existing facilities and programs. How can we improve those now? We also heard shade, pickleball courts, trail connections, walking paths, outdoor exercise stations, theater, basketball courts, and mountain biking trails. The next question we asked was, what was one program, class, or activity or service you would most like to see added or improved within the city of Laguna Niguel? And here we heard elements such as increased lap swimming, increased time, concerts, yoga. Nothing. I'm happy with the current. There's that nothing again. Because we want to make sure when people say nothing, we see what we have. That was the reason for the baseline inventory, not just to have a common vocabulary among the design team and the community, but to assess what's there now and how can we keep that or improve it throughout the next coming years. As well as senior activity programs, swim lessons, senior exercise classes, pickleball classes, more community events, movies, and cooking classes also came up as program requests. What we do as we go through this is we look for those common threads. You'll hear me say that a lot. Those common threads will start to show us what the maximum community impact will be from any of our recommendations. And listed alphabetically in alpha order here, we begin to aggregate some of those elements and those common threads, and we see them in these facility needs. When we hear elements such as accessible parks, handrails and walking paths, basketball courts, trails, bike trails, trail connections, clean, updated, well-maintained parks. There's that maintenance element again too, making sure that we preserve our parks to that high standard, upgrading equipment, looking at native plant material, as well as dog park improvements, dog-friendly amenities, parking, pickleball courts, playground renovations, swings, as well as restroom facilities. These were some of the most common facility mentions we heard throughout the entire process. Then we heard programs. Throughout that process, we started to hear the same programming events such as bicycle classes, bike events, community events, more concerts, community forums, performing arts classes, senior activities and programs, swimming activities, a number of mentions for different swimming activities or increased hours in swimming activities, and then teen sports programs, teen youth programs, as well as youth volunteer opportunities. Some of the most common elements that we've heard, again, throughout this process, those common threads. And now what I'd like to do is come back to the community here and ask you what you would like to see in terms of when these get implemented. Looking at some of those common threads, what we want to ask you is this something that should be implemented in the first 0 to 5 years, 5 to 10, or 10 to 15 years, or never in your opinion? So please, I would encourage you to take the survey, go onto the project website, or click underneath the link below on this video where you can take that survey and have your voice heard on it. Now, if there's a question throughout the process on that survey that you'd like to ask us, don't forget about that feedback button. At any point in time, you can click on that feedback button and make sure your voice is heard. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in the future.